I'm so excited to share my conversation about asexuality, aromanticism, and queerness in Shakespeare with Beks Roen, theater maker and storypreneur. We talk about ace representation in love stories, stage combat helping reduce gender dysphoria, how theater can support our communities, and much more. Let's dive in.
My name is Beks Roen. I use they, he pronouns interchangeably. I also use both names interchangeably. And I am a theater maker and a self-described storypreneur. I focus on telling queer stories in Shakespeare and fantasy to help people remember that they are loved and they're not alone.
I really love your work. Do you think Shakespeare's plays are queer back when he wrote them, and also the way that people perform them today?
This question in itself could be a whole thing. I borrow a lot from asexuality and aromanticism studies language of when they're looking at Shakespeare plays and other like early modern literature, they will look for queer resonances rather than trying to define, just because language has shifted so much over the centuries and obviously like the lived experiences might still resonate, but like the words non-binary and aromantic and asexual may not have existed in the vernacular, just like we no longer use the familiar second person thee, thou, thy, thine pronouns in English anymore. I find a queer resonance in the texts that we have because we don't have his actual what he wrote. We have a combination of basically pirated scripts where people would sit in the globe frantically scribbling along and writing it all down to then publish it more or less without Shakespeare's permission. And we have the prompt books. You would not, as an actor, get the full script. In Shakespeare's day, you would get a cue script, which was the line before yours, when you enter, your lines, and when you exit. So nobody except for the prompter had the full script, but because of theater fires we don't have a lot of the full even prompt books anymore. So as Shakespeare's company started dying, a few of the actors come together and they wrote down what they could remember. So there is a queer resonance. We don't even have the original texts to begin with, so there's already some interpretation in there. All of the casts in Shakespeare's day would have been male identifying, playing all of the roles regardless of gender. A lot of people will point to that as the gender fluidity of Shakespeare, especially in casting discussions. But I find more interesting trans resonances outside of those roles, just because a lot of the roles where you have Viola from Twelfth Night, for example, who starts the play female identifying, disguises herself as a man, and then by the end of the play, part of the happy ending and the reveal is her returning to her cisgender presentation. I find more queer resonances in some of the comedies like Much Ado About Nothing, where I have yet to see an interpretation that really like leans into the language of Beatrice being like, I would rather hear my dog bark at a crow than a man swear he loves me. I'm wearing my Ace shirt today, like it's right there. So, yeah, I think there's more room to play with, especially like Ace and Aro resonances in the plays. Part of why I became a producer and started Roguish Goblin Stories was to dig into that.
I love hearing the story about how Viola is played by an actor, a man playing that role, and then her character starts out as a woman, and then she plays a man or is a man for a little while and then goes back. Fictional characters really meant a lot to me growing up as a transmasculine person. The only representation I had, like Mulan or
Mulan.
the Alana books by Tamora Pierce. I'd love to hear a little more about how being an asexual fits into these stories. A lot of your work is about how to bring out those elements in the plays.
I am drawing a lot of inspiration from some of the Ace and Aro scholars like Dr. Eliza Blake, Dr. Ali O'Mara, Dr. Kat Clifford, Liesl Jensen, the scholars that are working in early modern asexuality studies. They have some really, really cool talks. Dr. Liza Blake, I saw, she was talking about Much Ado and the Aro and Ace resonances with Benedict and Beatrice. I'm also in the process of doing text prep as an actor for Romeo, and I'm specifically playing an Ace Romeo, which like feels
Oh,
very
that's so
counter.
cool.
I'm so excited. There have been some quite a few conversations with people being like, but Romeo and Juliet is quote unquote the greatest love story of all time. And I'm like, isn't that you want to be taking relationship advice from anybody in this play? But looking at Romeo in particular, especially with Shakespeare's work, I'm looking at how do they describe love? How do they react to it? How do they describe somebody who they are drawn to? For Romeo, their language stays a lot in like aesthetic visual imagery realms. Part of that is Shakespeare's poking fun at the Petrarchan lover archetype and saying, look at how ridiculous this is. But it also reads very much as aesthetic attraction, especially considering that like Romeo is a teenager about high school age, and me going, okay, me in high school pre-realizing I was aro ace, very much confused aesthetic attraction and also gender envy being a transmasculine person. I was like, oh, well, I'm straight, obviously, because I like hanging around guys and had no idea that that was not what everybody else was talking about with like dating. I see a lot of that struggle to figure out how to verbalize attraction that you're experiencing in Romeo's language. Similarly with other stories, like I'm always looking at the text of like, Jake's in As You Like It, who does the All the World's a Stage monologue, has another line to one of the lovers in that play, to Orlando, where they flat out say, the worst fault you have is to be in love. It's like anytime I see one of those little like flags of like somebody commenting on love, it always pings my radar of like the characters who flat do not choose to be in a partnered relationship.
I was wondering how Romeo was going to be, but then you said, well, he's a teenager, and then bringing it back to high school, that made so much sense to me. These kids are having this relationship. They feel drawn to each other, but it's not necessarily like sexual adult relationship. I actually really like that interpretation.
With the production that we're doing in particular, I have not met the actor playing Juliet as of yet, but it sounds like we'll get to explore what an ace-allo relationship looks like, because our Juliet actor, I don't think, is coming to the table with an ace perspective. So it's like, ooh, more confusion to put on stage. Now we have these two characters as they're trying to navigate a mismatch of relationship expectations and the pressure that they have from society for the relationship to look a certain way further underscores the tragedy.
I'd love to ask you about stage combat, which sounds fascinating. I believe we both have a background in martial arts, so I'm really interested in what stage combat is like and what you like about it and how it's influenced your gender journey.
I started my martial arts journey when I was very little, single digits. I had recently seen Star Wars as a kid and was like, I want to be a Jedi. And so my parents put me in Kempo, specifically karate classes. And so I trained in pressure point martial arts for years, on and off, into even high school. And then coming out of high school, I accidented my way into my first Shakespeare gig. I was like, I'm going to be an engineer, but I'll go to this audition just to like learn what an audition is. I've never spoken Shakespeare out loud. Woof. I'm not an actor. And then I got cast, and I was in the ensemble, so I got looped into a couple of the group fights specifically in Othello, because there aren't as many fights in As You Like It, which was the other show that we were doing that summer. And I picked up a sword and was like, oh, this is fun. I really like this. I started training to certify as an actor combatant, and stage combat is one of the quickest ways for me to be fully present in my body, and I don't know what it does to bypass gender dysphoria just like completely, but it's probably the sword. But it helped me, as I was early stage coming out, have a positive relationship physically, even as I was struggling to figure out how I was going to present and what my transition goals were. And then as I became a teacher, and I started assisting classes at my university and teaching on my own, getting to work with other trans and queer individuals who don't have a lot of, especially like physical presence confidence, and putting a sword in their hand and being like, we're gonna have fun. It is so cool to just watch their eyes light up and their shoulders drop. And I think part of it is you're so focused on getting the technique right so you don't hurt your partner, that you're focused more on caring for the partnership and for the scene. Physical anxiety that gender dysphoria is tied to, you don't have the space for it. And you're learning a new skill and you get to say you're swinging a sword around. Like, how fun is that?
It sounds like so much fun.
Yeah.
I can really relate to a lot of that, like having a correct posture, whether you're doing in hand martial arts or whether you're holding a weapon, you have to drop your shoulders and stand up straight. A lot of us trans people are used to doing like the hide your chest hunch. It's hard to do while you're like running around holding a sword. So I really love that you're inspiring confidence.
Yeah. And it tricks you into working out. So, like, bonus.
That's excellent. You mentioned when you reached out that theaters can take on some really ambitious projects to nourish and fight for communities, such as building a community garden, working on affordable housing, and even returning stolen land. That sounds so much more beyond what I would imagine a community theater could do. Could you share some of how that's possible?
Americans for the Arts has an arts impact explorer, this huge color wheel of like 30 different sectors, including like housing, political involvement, obviously like diversity, equity, and inclusion, immigration. Because stories are so foundational to just how we learn, how we put meaning to the world as humans. An anthropological study was saying that storytelling was the technology that shifted us from Neanderthals into Homo sapiens. And I especially have a background in a lot of outdoor Shakespeare. So you're naturally in like parks and other outdoor settings. It would not be too much of a stretch to have an outdoor theater company partner with a local group that's working on community gardens. As we build the community garden, we're just going to stick a stage in there. And a lot of the theater that I've been able to do has been because the companies have attached actor housing. Because I travel, I was in 10 states in 2025, going from show to show to show to show. That was a lot. I could only do it because the companies had an Airbnb or an apartment. As you build resources and partnerships, it's not too much of a stretch to create a land trust or some form of like communally held space that has Indigenous leadership that is working in those other aspects of building that affordable housing for artists, for queer communities, and then building the community gardens. Theater already feeds the mind and the soul just as the nature of the art. You're telling stories together, you're sharing life together, you're sharing food together, taking the lead from local Indigenous stewards. That just seemed like the natural, logical next step for me. I'm really excited to see what could that look like.
Yeah, that truly sounds amazing and supportive of the community. I love that you said that theater nourishes the soul and art is a very nourishing thing. So bringing that to the community is important all by itself. I went to a night sky stories talk by park rangers out in California. They told stories that they had learned from Indigenous people and elders telling some of the stories from the Americas about the night sky. I thought that was really special, bringing some of the actually local culture into what they were doing. In your Adventurer's Guide to Hope Keeping, which I'll share the link to, I loved your affirmations. One of them was, I am worthy of love. I was wondering how you think self-affirmation is particularly important for queer people, LGBT people.
Every morning, the first thing that I try to do when I wake up, I had a friend of mine, Shayna Woods at Prophetess Protest, teach me EFT tapping, which is tapping on pressure points just really gently as you are saying the affirmations. And one of the things I like about it is it's giving you that physical response of your body is safe. You can breathe. You're not just being like, I'm happy when life sucks. You're acknowledging that, like, okay, there's part of me that might not be all the way there yet. That's okay. I can let that go, and I still love myself regardless. So it's that being able to hold on to, I love myself, I love myself, I love myself. I have noticed tapping every morning, my family noticed a measurable uptick in my mental health. I've been doing it for about 3 weeks now. Anytime I start to feel my anxiety activate, my immediate next reaction is to sit, take that breath and start mentally running that affirmation script in my head, even if I don't have the time to fully do the tapping.
Thank you for sharing that. I love that as a technique. I experience anxiety also, so I really think that I would benefit from doing this, and
Yeah.
I'm gonna try it. I
Yeah.
think that, yeah, that unconditional love that you're suggesting for yourself, that's so powerful and really important.
Yeah.
What brings you hope?
This might be a little cliche, but theater, like, really and truly. I love getting to see theater, especially from students and emerging actors that have much more of a, we love this so much and we're just going for it. There is such a pure love that comes through. Part of it has to do with the vulnerability of doing a live show where it's like, if you drop something and it rolls across the stage, reminding everybody in the room, audience and artist alike, that we're all on this journey together. We're all on this life journey together. We don't do this alone. We're not meant to be lone wolves. I follow trans news that doesn't suck and Ace Dad Advice and Gentle Giant Ace, and just seeing the work that other like trans and ace and aro scholars and creators are putting out. I keep coming back to stories, being able to gather a room of people and the depth of emotional support and camaraderie that you get working on a production is very deep, very quick. And so getting to gather people in a room and tell a story together and just remind each other you're loved, you're not alone. That's the core of everything that I do is you're loved, you're not alone. You're loved, you're not alone. You're loved, you're not alone.
Thank you for that. It's really powerful. You're loved and you're not alone.
Yeah,
That's, I think we all need that.
absolutely.
Is there anything else that you were hoping we'd talk about, but I didn't bring up?
I run Roguish Goblin Stories, which is theater streaming platform. We're working on funding our first couple shows. We're going to do mostly theater, like live shows, but we record everything. We have a couple shows and a lot of behind the scenes already on the platform. So you can check it out at Beks Roen.
I'll add all the links in the description. If you're watching this, you should definitely like and subscribe, not only to my channel, but to Beks's channel. We both have newsletters. I have amplifyrespect.com, and Beks has a newsletter as well, that amazing Adventurer's Guide to Hope Keeping. And then there's Roguish Goblin Stories, which sounds like so much fun and definitely something that I want to sign up for. So check all those out. And Beks, thank you so much for such a lovely discussion. I love all of your excitement, your enthusiasm, and how much good, positive work you're doing to support others in the community.
Thank you for having me. It's been so much fun to chat and get to know you.